Hello, I'm Christian, and welcome to the Jenoir Leadership podcast, a show where we talk about effective collaboration, influence, and leadership in an increasingly complex world. My interview partner is Dr. Dirk Schlimm. Dirk is an international leadership expert and the author of Influencing Powerful People. The purpose of this podcast is to share ideas and stimulate discussion, and it does not constitute professional advice of any kind. If such advice is needed, the services of a competent professional should be sought. The speakers, host, and Jenoir International Incorporated are not to be held responsible for any use, misuse, or reuse of the content. Enjoy the show. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Jenoir Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Christian. Today we are so pleased to bring you part 2 of a 2-part interview series with Gerardo Chiaia. We've had a fantastic time discussing a wide variety of topics with Gerardo, so please, if you haven't listened to part 1, pause this episode, go listen to that. It will serve not only as an amazing introduction, but so much to be learned from that first edition already. But now, as we dive into part 2 of this conversation, we're going to get into topics of adaptability, so important in leadership. We're going to be talking about leadership across cultures, and Gerardo is going to share some of his experience and what he's learned from his time in the plastics industry. So please get ready for a great episode and enjoy. We've talked now about quite of those personal attributes, let's say, of leadership, maybe. But so let's change gears here a little bit, right? The world is changing, business is changing, competitive landscape is changing, technology is changing, geopolitics are changing. We see that every day, and I think we experience that every day, especially if we do international business. The world is a lot more fragmented than it was before. Some markets are harder to access. And so that means leadership is about adaptability. It means to stay responsive to market trends and industry technological developments. And you're an expert in the plastics sector. So from that vantage point, though, the big story is, digitization, AI. Every software company is now an AI company, and some truly are, and maybe others just changing their names a little bit. But how is that accelerating change? How do you look at that? What does that mean for you as a leader? Can you just share a little bit there?
Yeah, I think you're right, Dirk. I often say to the team that perpetual instability and discomfort is here to stay, right? So this is not going to change. We need to adapt to the world constant evolution, either dictated by crisis, pandemic, war, or fast technology change, as you mentioned, the AI and so on, right? So to that regards, you need to accept that you do not have all the capabilities in-house to solve all those contradictions that come to you. Right. So if you believe that you can solve everything by the people you have, then certainly you're going to get into trouble. So you need to partners, and you need to partners either with the best suppliers, the universities, truly AI company that has the knowledge, but also startups company, and actually having an environment that foster innovations, and that's the only way you can survive today. So it's partnering and work together, as long as you set the right goal of what good looks like, and then bring the different partners to solve the problems you're trying to solve. So it's the only way I see going forward.
Yeah, and I think, Gerardo, that the way you answered the question does relate to our topic of leadership here, because we may think about leadership, about leading our teams, depending on where we are in the organization. For you as a CEO, you're leading the enterprise, but you're really leading a whole, dare I say, ecosystem. Another overused term, but it is true, right? That you're leading an extended enterprise. That those startups, universities, those people there, they become part of your team in some way. You have, more direction maybe for some, less direction for others. So those can be specialists where you really need to keep them on board. And that just shows that the quality of good leadership that most people in their minds may be applying to their direct teams really applies across
the enterprise, and those people have to see your leadership as well. And so partnering is so important and such an important aspect of dealing with change. So thanks for highlighting that for us. We talked earlier about your exploits in China. Let's call it, and being very effective across different cultures. I remember working with your leadership team in the Middle East, in Dubai. That was good. Work with some of your people in the US, as well, and so you have always been very good at bridging cultures, and for me, I will tell you, I worked with some people in China that were working with you. I worked with one gentleman in Italy, I remember very well, and with these people, and maybe it takes a year until you get to know them at a personal level. You talk with a person in Italy, literally in 45 minutes, you know their whole life story. So, and it just shows how different people are, how cultures are different, and so again, talk a little bit about the being yourself part. This is where you started us off, but then also you're operating in different cultures. How do those two things fit together, being yourself and relating to different cultures?
Yeah, I think although my English is not always perfect, and my accents and the wording and so on, I think when I can communicate without anyone translate it to me, I think I am at my best. So when I went to China, there was a big change, right? I needed to flex and adapt, or I would not be successful. Just because someone else translate for you, you don't have the same impact. And there, I understood that I really had to change, and I started really something that I learned from there is I started to really learn to listen. Even if I could not understand, I was forced to listen, either the intonations or to watch the body language. I was forced not to interrupt, which before that I was often doing, and so because I had to wait the translation, so I learned really the passions and the humility in China, and I think I became a better person and a better leader once I went out from China. China is a fantastic country with wonderful people. I certainly will never. I would always remember that time.
Yeah, and that's good, and maybe that's what it takes sometimes to be forced to do something. I certainly need to be forced to listen, so I will take that away. I will take that away here for myself. That's a good reminder and good advice right there. Gerardo, you are in the plastics industry, and you, I think, have been in the plastics industry for most, if not all, of your professional life. So you know the industry inside and out, and you know that it has been and is under scrutiny for its environmental impact. And so I have two questions really that are more industry focused, but I think that have application beyond people who listen to us in other industries. So just give us your perspective on innovation in sustainable packaging, and just what is Logoplaste doing to address the sustainability changes that are a big part of the conversation in the plastics industry right now.
So I think we could do a podcast just for that, but I think first we need to put science on the decisions gate, on decisions we make. Sometimes either you can have that on a political environment as well, but here in what we talk about plastic, it's very important when it comes to the decisions on packaging substrate, like plastic or cartons or can and glass. We have to look at the full life cycle impact of the different materials. And there, if you put the science, interesting enough, you will find out that PET or HDPE plastic have the lowest carbon impact versus, for example, glass, or can. So just to remind everybody that listen to us on this podcast, you need 1,700 degrees C to transition sand to glass. Right? And you need 900 degrees C to melt steel, while plastic just itself need only 250. So when you take that, where the problems we're trying to solve is to reduce temperature and it's to reduce the emissions of CO2 emissions. So really, you need to take this into considerations. And truly, if you collect, we know if you collect the plastic bottles or packaging, you can recycle either biomechanical recycling or chemical that is actually ramping up. So when we talk about the technologies, we are working closely with our customers to develop solutions that have obviously 100% recyclable and that have the highest content of recycled materials, including into the bottles. We're also working on connectivity of the bottles and bottles of the future, which would as well facilitate the waste management and also make every package is unique and traceable. So that's also something that we're developing. And we also are working on other business models, not just manufacturing plastic and recycle them, but a lot on reuse, refill technology. And at the end, Dirk, and to be honest, the plastic doesn't get into the river and the sea by itself, right? It was not born there. So we all here in the podcast and everybody else that listen to us, we need to be more accurate there and work on the waste management. With the new European law, there will be, for example, deposit scheme, which will be mandatory by 2027. For example, in Germany, it's already there. And in Germany, you recycle 95% of the plastic. And so in the futures, we will give value to waste. And if you give value to waste, people will collect and recycle because there is value to that. And I think that is a really important step.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Gerardo. And you mentioned maybe that is another podcast, but so good. It's coming from you that we have to have you back. We actually did have a episode early on when Christian and I started the podcast on innovation and sustainability. We talked about shoes and running shoes and how there are schemes to rent a running shoe, send it back, and that same running shoe is made into a new shoe, so that those materials are not cross-contaminated with other materials, creating a circular economy. So those things are very, very topical. But then it also shows how you, as a leader, on the one hand, you know a lot about people, you know a lot of motivation, but obviously you know a lot about the industry, you know a lot about technology, and you have a bigger picture. Here you talked about energy intensity of manufacturing processes and comparing those across materials, and so just telling the bigger story here. But Gerardo, let's stay with this a little bit. So things are changing. Things are certainly changing rapidly in the plastics industry. Tell us a little bit more about innovation. What do you see coming? How do you position an organization for innovation? How do you lead, if you will, the innovative process in a company like Logoplaste?
I think, for us at Logoplaste and in any company that is in the plastic industry, sustainability has to be a gate of everything you do, right? So it has to be, innovation is about sustainability, is about that. And for us in the plastic industry, we need to drive the best life cycle of the product, which means that we have to reduce the CO2 emissions, being the net zero science-based target. And so we need to move away from a fossil feedstock if you want to get there, meaning that you have to have obviously the most, you need to have recycled materials, but or you can have as well bio-based materials, so work on that one. Also, I think that you need to, like I said before, that science need to prevail, and I truly think that science will prevail in the future, with what I said before, with the deposit scheme in place in all the countries, and technology of recycling that works will be able to have sustainable solutions. As an example, we work with many companies, but there is new technologies that have been developed, such as the carbon captures. I think there's a company out there, Lanzatech. You can check it out, where basically you can now, through carbon capture, create ethylene away from fossil and use that ethylene as a feedstock for HDPE, for example, plastic, basically helping the decarbonizations. That's a fantastic solutions. You really transforming carbon into ethylene. It is, I think it's just a question of time that this technology will be industrials and will move forwards. Also solving the image, I would say, from plastic rather than the true issue of the plastic industry.
Yeah. And Gerardo, I think your passion really comes through here for this, and being part of the solution, using technology and innovation to be part of the solution, and that gets us back to the topic of energizing. Really, right? Is when people see that, and again, you said you lead by example. You're excited by this. You know that you're making a contribution to a very difficult topic here. And so that is energizing, which is really the theme of our discussion here today. But we don't want to make it sound too easy. Right? Leadership is hard, as you mentioned earlier. Being a CEO is hard, not for the faint of heart. You mentioned that earlier, and so. On the topic of challenges, you mentioned setbacks, right? A lot of setbacks. So you're an expert in setbacks. You just told us a bit earlier. So maybe you can share another personal leadership challenge that you faced, and then how you've overcome it. What did you do when it got difficult? And you mentioned perseverance and resilience before. Maybe we can just ask you about this one more time, and how overcoming a challenge like this really has contributed to your growth as a leader, and to remind people, when you run into challenges, this is part of your practical MBA of leadership, right? There is no shortcut to a leading position other than working through some of those challenging, and for people, hopefully, when they run into these problems, see, hey, this is my opportunity to show my leadership mettle, and to approach that challenge maybe a bit more energetically, dare I say, than they otherwise would.
No, I think and every leader will recognize that. Obviously, going through a layoff of a person is often a failure from the leader, and a failure from the employee. There is not one fault. I always say that any leader that likes to lay off people should be fired the first one, right? So it's not something that you should like, because it's a failure. Again, it's a failure on both sides. And I had a lot of learning there and experience, but I have an anecdote, if you want. When I was a president of Hotrunner business at Husky, we had the strategy sessions, and we decided to focus and invest in the automotive market, which was a market very small, that the company thought could expand, but we didn't have any experience nor any capability there. And so I hired a person to lead this business, and that person was coming from the automotive, with the automotive mindset. And so after, I guess, 6 months, I had the entire team coming to me and complaining about him, that he was not listening, that he did not know enough about the market. And so after some thought and some time, I was convinced that he was not the right person, and I decided to let him go. I think it was a day or a few days before I lay him off. I met with Andy Conger. He's the ex-chairman of the board of Moldmaster. He was board member at Husky. He was chairman of the board of Tractel Group and many others. A very good person. We discussed, and I, as we were chatting from time to time, I explained him the issue, and then he sat there for a bit of a silence, and he asked me a few simple questions. And he said, Gerardo, why did you hire him? Are you the expert in the automotive? And does the guy has track record of success in the automotive in the past that you hired him? And well, those questions, when he asked me, I realized that probably the one who were not listening was my team. The one who didn't know what it takes to grow the automotive was my team. And that instead of going their way, I should have protected him. Because if I would have protected him from day one, they would have followed. They would have listened, and we would have moved faster. So luckily, it was not too late because it was before I took the decisions, and he kept in the team, and with him we developed one of the best drop-in manifold in the automotive industry. So an important point for leaders is that if you don't have the capabilities and if you want a different mindset, the person you are, because of the culture of your company, you need to protect them.
Yeah, Jared. So that's interesting. What's going through my mind when I'm listening to you here is you talked earlier about the importance of listening as a leader, but in this case, it's not just you listening. You had to get your entire team to listen to somebody, and so that's really taking it to the next level. And so that's a great story here. Listen, Jardo, these are great insights. Again, I do want to say that I had the opportunity to speak with leaders around the world who have worked for you, have worked with you here in Toronto, in the US, all over Europe, in the Middle East, and in China. So those are people from different cultures, very different temperaments, but they all have benefited from having you as a leader. And I think that's something we can all aspire to. And this is what I talk to when I do coach leaders. I talk about that. Wouldn't it be amazing when people would genuinely say, I was glad to have worked for this person as a leader. I learned from them. I accomplished a lot with their guidance, and they have made my life better. And again, so I know so many people who would say that about you. So fantastic for me to have had this chat here with you. And we will give it back to Christian here, so allow him to get a question in. But it's been really fantastic to be talking to you, Gerardo. Thank you.
Thank you, Dirk. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'll add my thanks as well. That was an amazing conversation to listen into, and I have pages of notes here that I will be taking and studying, and Dirk and I will unpack them a bit more. But Gerardo, we started this conversation, and I made a note of this, that the boss can really make or break the quality of life for people, and that is such a high calling in an organization, lots of responsibility, and that's why we want to take seriously to be energizing in our leadership. So the question I would have for you, looking ahead, what advice might you give to emerging leaders who aspire to make a positive impact in their organizations and industries?
So, look, I think now with my age and experience and maturity, I would say that actually I will give you two advice. The first one is to find the right mentor and learn from them. I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to meet truly great leaders I could learn from, such as Dirk. It's not because we are in his postcard on your podcast, but truly a great leader. Jim Reed, Andy Conger, Philippe de Botton, Alexandre Relvas that I met in Logoplaste, and I also had the opportunity to participate in many lab leadership sessions with Jim Collins. So the first thing is, find the mentor and truly vacuum, if you want to, everything he knows. So that's an opportunity. That's the first point, I think, very important. And the second one really is understand your strengths, weaknesses, and your values, and put them forward. And at the end, lead authentically. So lead authentically is the only way possible going forwards. Don't try to be somebody else. Just be yourself with your strengths and weaknesses as a leader, and you will see that you will make great things forward. So that's the 2 points that I would leave it to the team that listen to the podcast.
No, wonderful. And those, I think, are two powerful and very practical points to end on. As always, the Jenoir Leadership Podcast, we want to be practical. And I think this interview very much so hit those points. So, Gerardo, thank you so much. Dirk and I will have to probably come back just to unpack so many of these points. I'm looking at my notes, and we covered so much helpful ground. We talked about being authentic and transparent. And I love that we ended there as well. It just came full circle with authenticity. But we talked about bringing enthusiasm and positivity, even in difficult times. We talked about those core values of respect, transparency, and honesty. We talked about perseverance and resilience being strengths that lead to success. And then we got into those practical examples about your experience in the plastic industry, thinking about innovation, sustainability, science, and so much more. So, Gerardo, we truly covered a lot of ground, and I'm glad that we hinted that we might need to come back again and bring you on for another podcast episode. So, Dirk, I'll leave that in your hands. Perhaps we can arrange that. I would be so glad to host that. But why don't we end here? Gerardo, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Christian. It's amazing how you have summarized all that. Thank you, Dirk. Just a question. I hope the pre-recording of the podcast will not come to the online, right? Because I guess we had a lot of fun, and it was super nice, super good to be with both of you. Always great to now to see you with the technology of FaceTimes and so on. So really, really enjoyed the time with both of you. Thank you very much for having me in your podcast.
All right, and a big thank you to Gerardo as well for joining us on the show. That was such an amazing conversation. I know that Dirk and I had a great time. I hope that Gerardo had a great time. And of course, I hope that you, listener, learned a lot and got something out of it that you're able to take to your situation, to your context, and apply it. So please, if you have any questions, any comments, or want to share about how you are applying some of the things you learn, either from this interview or the Jenoir Leadership Podcast as a whole, please let us know. We'd love to maybe talk about that and share a bit about that on the show itself. But that's all for our time today. Join us next time when Dirk and I will reflect on our conversation with Gerardo, maybe share some things that stood out to us, places where we think, hey, that was so valuable, we need to dig a little deeper or talk about application. But that's next time, and until then, take care.